A joint research project from Logitech and Avixa surveyed more than 1,600 people. 1 in 3 faculty members has seriously considered leaving their institution because of poor technology. Not because of their pay, not because of their workload, not because of their boss, but because a projector froze during a midterm review, because the remote students couldn't hear them. The laminated instruction sheet next to every classroom panel, it is not a feature, it is a confession. That means the system was never intuitive enough to begin with. How do you take information like this and have a meaningful conversation with the people that quite frankly write the checks at the end of the day?
You take this article and you print it as big as you can and you make that the wallpaper for the president. Done.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. My family motto is print, laminate, distribute.
A couple of acquisitions, Gensler new workplace study, and what happens when your classroom technology stops working. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 780, recorded Friday, March 13th, 2026. The importance of managed services. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of the biggest news and stories in the AV and the IT world. Barco goes all in on audio. AI isn't emptying your office. It actually might make it more human. And A10 claims 2 industry first for control connectivity. Let's get into it. Barco has agreed in principle to acquire Vervent Audio Holding. Now, if you don't know Vervent, you definitely know their brands, Focal and Neem. These are 2 of the most respected names in high-end audio anywhere in the world. Deal is valued at approximately 135 million euros. Vervent brings around 110 million euros in annual revenue to the table. Here's the strategic play. Barco has long been a visual powerhouse. Cinema projectors, enterprise displays, DVD LED walls, collaboration systems. Now they're making the move to become a fully integrated audiovisual company. Pictures and sound all together, delivered as one. After the deal closes, Vervent joins Barco's entertainment division. The combined portfolio spans home cinema, public spaces, and professional markets. From a big acquisition to a big idea, one that directly affects how we build and how we design it. Gensler Research Institute surveyed more than 16,000 workers across 16 different countries. The question, how is AI changing the workplace? And the answer, not what most people expected. AI isn't pushing people out of the office. It may actually be pulling them back in. Gensler identified a group they'll call AI power users, workers who regularly use AI in both their job and personal lives. That's about 30% of their sample. Those power users spend less time working alone, more time learning, more time collaborating, more time socializing with teammates. And they report stronger team relationships than workers who rarely use AI at all. The theory here is when AI handles the routine work, people get their bandwidth back, and they're investing that bandwidth in each other. So what does that mean for the spaces that we all build? Physical workplace isn't becoming obsolete, it actually is becoming more important. Workers told Gensler they want spaces built for learning, collaboration, and wellness. Quiet focus rooms, flexible meeting spaces, training and coaching areas, and the technology that makes all of that work seamlessly. Bottom line here is, best AV and IT environments of the next 5 years won't just connect people to their tools, they'll connect people to each other. NSCA is doing a bit of acquiring themselves. They have acquired Navigate Management Consulting and brought it fully in-house. And if you've ever worked with Navigate, you know what they do. They're a coaching and business operations firm built specifically for commercial integrators. Process improvement, operational efficiency, profitability, that is their lane. That's what they do. Navigate was previously owned by Solutions 360 before Solutions 360 was acquired by Northrim Horizon late last year. There's a bit of a connection grid going on here. Northrim's decision was to keep Navigate inside the integration community. Now, here's what changes. Navigate's online learning platform, Navigate Academy, will become part of NSCA's new Excellence in Business Operations Knowledge Hub. They're calling it the XBO. That platform is expected to launch later in 2026. A10 International just announced what it's calling two industry first in a single box. The product is the KX9980. It's a 5K DisplayPort dual display KVM over IP extender, and it is built for mission control systems. First, this is the first time USB 3.2 Gen 1 has been integrated into a KVM over IP solution. Now, that means high-speed peripheral access over an IP connection and the response time of a local setup. Second, KX9980 also introduces virtual machine support through KVM-based IT/OT network separations. What that means in practice is operators can access both physical servers and virtual machines while keeping operational technology completely isolated from the IT network. Now, that separation is enforced at the hardware level. Now, something we're going to close here with is definitely worth celebrating. The AV Awards America has just announced its inaugural class of winners. If you are not aware, the AV Awards have been a benchmark for excellence in the AV industry for over 25 years. I have attended it many times. My buddy Chris Netto and I have broadcasted from the AV Awards. It is a fantastic experience, and they have finally brought that to America. Not the pageantry yet, not the black tie affair, but at least the awards we're making progress here. And this is the first time that program is expanded here to cover the full Western Hemisphere: U.S., Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean. A few highlights from the first class of winners. Best use of emerging technology went to NetSpeak for what they're calling the world's first AI orchestration platform for multi-vendor AV environments. Broadcast Project of the Year went to Diversified for their work on Transformation Church. Collaboration Technology of the Year went to Igloo Vision for their Igloo Core Engine. Control and Signal Management Solution of the Year went to INOGenie for Toggle Rooms XT. And Display Technology of the Year went to Epson for the EBPQ 2220B. It's a 20,000 lumen 4K projector. Congratulations to all of this year's winners. The complete list is available at avmagazine.com. That is your AV news for the week. Stick around for this week's roundtable, where we're going to tackle managed AV services and the hidden cost of unreliable classroom technology. This is AV Week. Welcome back. Now with us to talk about a couple more topics that we've got. First and foremost, my good friend Dawn Mead. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks for having me, as usual, Tim.
Absolutely, ma'am. Justin O'Connor, a guy I've known for a very long time. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me back on. It's been a minute.
Absolutely. And a young man I've gotten to know all the way over in the UK. He actually came to visit us here in the States. Ross Noonan, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Ross made his way through New York. And I think Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, and we turned him on to Korea Street there in New York, and he enjoyed himself, because if you don't, Korean barbecue is just some of the best stuff in the entire world. All right, this is not a food podcast. First topic from our friends over at AV Magazine. This is about managed AV, and here's the thing. We have talked about this for a very long time. If you've ever read Commercial Integrator since its inception, I think their very first issue talked about how integrators need to get into managed services in some way, shape, or form. This is an article, not on AV Magazine, but on Rave Pubs, by a young man by the name of Bill Thrasher at AV Tech Media. He puts a little bit finer point on it. His argument is pretty simple and a little uncomfortable for some organizations. A room gets built, system gets installed, somebody answers tickets, that's fine. Most organizations don't have like one person owning it, and nobody sees the entire picture until something kind of falls apart. Thrasher calls this the project-centric trap. The attention peaks at installation, then fades pretty fast. Now, the result is teams conditioned to respond to fires instead of prevent them. His case is for managed AV, and it is really a case for governance, for standardization, for basic archetypes in different rooms. What I want to get into here is he talks about the importance of these managed services, not just from the integrator standpoint, but also from the IT and the AV buyer. And Dawn, I am going to start with you on this. Dawn has done a number of things. Most recently, she was the AV decision maker, the AV procurer at her last job. So really, when you talk about this and you look at this, what do you think the biggest obstacle is in getting folks where you were to commit to a managed AV, or budget or politics or something else entirely?
Well, this was literally something I was working on, and it was in progress as I was leaving that company. Just as a bit of background, if you haven't seen me on this show forever, I was an integrator for most of my career, and then I just spent 8 years on the dark side without cookies. I was an end user. And so this is something that really speaks to me from both sides of the coin, the whole idea of managed AV. Now, on the end user side, we spent most of that 8 years, myself and members of my team, trying to convince the enterprise that they really wanted to do this, that having a single point of monitoring and maintenance and oversight for the AV estate in the corporation, or even just one site in the corporation, would be of a major benefit to the company, both in cost savings on installation and future planning, cost savings on equipment work, service calls, that sort of thing. All of that management, even just time down. So there were a lot of reasons to do it. And as you say, it's a matter of who's going to pay for it. Is it going to be this team or that team? If you're working for a small local regional company, or even a big company that only has one location, it's not as difficult. But if you're talking about a large national or multinational with sites all over the planet, it becomes a case of, are you paying for this? Am I paying for? Why are you paying for it? How who's going to pay for it? Who's going to watch it? Who's going to be in charge of it? And when you're that spread out, also, you have the case of, who is your integrator? What partner are you working with? I love our industry. I love our manufacturers. I love our integrators. Everybody has their own little platform. This product or that product has their monitoring platform. This integrator or that integrator has their platform. And there are a few companies out there now that have ecumenical, wider platforms that work with everybody. When you're talking about a regional or local company that needs one of these, and trust me, you do if you're watching, get one that works for what you're buying or who you're working with at that site. But if you're a larger multinational, don't necessarily lock yourself in with this integrator or this product, because as much as we love this integrator or this product, they might not be available everywhere you have a site. They might not be available during the course of the lifetime of your needing this room monitored or maintained. So look at something a little more ecumenical, something a little more, works with everybody. So when I was reading this article in preparation for this show, I was very much, yes, we need this. Yes, I see it. I saw it starting when I was an integrator. I definitely saw it as an end user. I was trying to do it as an end user. And I maintain that is definitely a soapbox that I have added to climb on and preach from. But it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, even though it's standardizing. It's going to be what works best for your company and what works best for your integrator. And if you're an integrator or a manufacturer, play nice with other people. Yes, if we're a local end user, we'll use your product if you're our only integrator or our only product. But if we're a bigger company, we can't lock in with you when we've got 1,000 other sites or 1,000 other rooms that might not fit with what you have. So be kind, play nice together, and your end users will love you and be much more likely to use you again and again.
Justin, you have spent an awful lot of years on the manufacturer side, so that's where I'm going to pick on you at. What can manufacturers do to help this conversation, to help, as Dawn puts it, the ecumenical part of the monitoring platforms, whether that is, an open standard system like the Excite folks, or, I'm trying to hesitate to call out a couple of people, because obviously we've got Utility, we've got Excite, you've got NetSpeak, you've got a couple other people that are trying to wrap their heads around this. But what can manufacturers do to help drive this conversation and help the ecumenical part?
In my experience, I think one of the keys to any product development is to really understand the need. Like, we hear this all the time. It sounds kind of generic, but it is really, really important. Manufacturers can get caught up in the what so easily, and especially as the systems get more complex, and complexity can mean multiple disciplines, it can mean a multi-campus, complexity can mean a lot of things, but there's development complexity, software, firmware, hardware, and as that grows, we can lose sight of the why. Why on earth are we even doing this? Because the what gets so enticing or exciting, or you have, one customer who is really influential who has a specific what that they're after. And then it's easy to lose sight of why you're doing it. But even beyond the why is still, it's always a big picture. You have users and you have people who are responsible for meeting those users' needs, and they have to do it profitably. And profit doesn't just mean money. It means, it works effectively. You can fix it effectively. And I think that manufacturers have a lot to offer. But really, they need to be focused on the bigger picture of the need and the why. And so that's not a technological answer per se, or even an architecture answer per se, but it kind of doesn't matter whether you're making a single widget or you're making a managed service that can cover the globe. If you don't know the why and your customers' needs aren't being met, you're basically making decoration for fun.
Okay. Ross, you'll have the last word on this. Why are managed services important for not just manufacturers, for integrators? Why are they important for the IT manager and the AV teams that are getting your gear, getting your products installed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming at this from an angle where I've always worked in the manufacturing part of the industry where we've always been at the end of the chain. So that was televisions going back nearly 20 years ago, projectors, and then LED screens. And so before you get to that point, you could have 100 different brands that are inputting or deciphering or deciding on what's going on to that screen and how it's being managed. And we expect integrators to be able to be an expert in delivering all of that. You could be working with 5 brands just to get a signal from one place to another. And so whenever I used to go on site, I would often have to work my way backwards along that chain and try and determine where there's a problem before it got to my product, which was always the bit that was to blame because it didn't work. And that opened my eyes to some of the challenges these integrators have, which is that there are so many options out there. And you mentioned that often the manufacturer's focus and the integrator's focus on that initial install, getting it right, getting the stacking right, getting the customer happy. And a lot of the time, the post-service falls to the wayside. And there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, I've been to one site and met 5 different engineers in the space of 6 weeks, who some of them had never been on site before. One reason for that is that a lot of these installers or the integrators who are delivering the projects are now wanting to freelance. That's where the money is. They're picking and choosing the kind of projects that they want to work on. And then the system integrator a lot of the time has to pick up those pieces and say, well, we're going to manage that for you over the next 3 or 5 years. But there's 20 different relationships with all the different suppliers in there that need to be maintained. And then you've got an account manager that has to look after it from a customer relationship point of view. So if we look at LED, which is what we primarily do, a lot of people see these as just big screens, and they are big screens. Fundamentally, they do have thousands of components in them. Each cabinet is effectively a TV in its own right, power supply, hub board. That makes it extremely difficult for integrators to offer a comprehensive managed service, so they tend to lean on companies like us to support them. And I think that in my particular company, we've had to really lean on that. Managed service is really important because what we do can be quite complicated, and we can't expect the integrator to know all of the technical bits behind that. And fundamentally, we try to offer comprehensive training. We think that empowering people on how our equipment is used and how it should be maintained is the best way for them to become ambassadors for us on site. And I don't see an awful lot of that happening in some of the other companies that I used to work with. If you can train up system integrators to be a brand ambassador for you and understand things on a comprehensive level, they're going to be much better at that first line of support for you. So that's where we tend to start, and it's made a big difference for us. Sure.
You may have just answered this, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. Ross, do you think that it's easier for the integrator to sell this type of service, this managed services, if you guys provide it, because at that point, it's almost like a package deal, right? It's a product that they are, in essence, purchasing from the manufacturer and passing it along, right, to the IT manager. Or do you think it's easier for them to, in essence, home roll their own managed services and augment it from manufacturers like you and others?
I think there's a bit of both. I think in some instances, I think system integrators are afraid to say, no, we can't do this, particularly when it comes to trying to win a project. And so a lot of the time we end up having to pick up pieces in some instances. I'm sure that's the same across other bits of the industry when it comes to manufacturing. I think service is a very similar one, which is that sometimes the client can't find the budget or doesn't see the need for the budget for a managed service during that initial outlay for the project. But when the chips are down, things are going wrong, that's when they start to learn that actually having somebody on hand, whether that's permanently and has been trained in all these different disciplines, or, as you mentioned, when it comes to something a bit more bespoke, like the screen behind me, having somebody on call from the supplier or the manufacturer to be your point of call. Obviously, you have to pay for that, but it does give you peace of mind. It takes the pressure off the system integrator. They really want to be managing the client. They want to be managing that relationship. They want to make sure that they've got that relationship for the next 3-5 years, so that when that project's refreshed, they're part of that equation. They don't want to be getting bogged down in technical calls for every supplier because they're expected to be that frontline support. They don't make the product, but they should have clear lines of communication to get things fixed and sorted when they need them.
All right, we're going to jump to one of my favorite topics, and that is the education market. A joint research project from Logitech and AVIXA surveyed more than 1,600 people, AV, IT professionals, faculty, students. Here's the thing that should reframe your next budget conversation. And I'm going to say that generically because I'm talking to both corporate and higher ed. The higher ed is still where my heart is because I'm an old technology manager. 1 in 3 faculty members has seriously considered leaving their institution because of poor technology. Not because of their pay, not because of their workload, not because of their boss, but because a projector froze during a midterm review, because the remote students couldn't hear them, all sorts of stuff. And here is one of those side things. My poor son, God love him, he's 17 now, but he grew up around me and doing what we do. He has been the tech support in his high school and middle school since he was about 10. So yeah, bad technology can certainly give teachers headaches. Research also found that 50% of faculty deal with AV challenges daily or weekly, hardware malfunctions, video conferencing failures, software access issues. On the student side, 61% report connectivity disruptions, 66% struggle with login failures regularly. Research also surfaces something that cuts a little bit close to home. The laminated instruction sheet next to every classroom panel, it is not a feature, it is a confession. That means the system was never intuitive enough to begin with. I have some issues with that. The 51% of students say hybrid course availability factors into which institution they choose to attend. Obviously, the hybrid part means that's where AV comes in and IT. Your infrastructure is now a recruitment asset or a liability. Justin, we are going to start with you. I am glad. How the heck do you translate all of this stuff into having a conversation with your president, having a conversation with your VP of finance, and quite frankly, having a conversation with your CFO, because this cuts both ways, both in education and in corporate, because if your employees are having a difficult time with your technology, they're going to consider leaving too. And I would expect that either AVIXA will drive this or Logitech will drive this next research piece, because they should do the same thing on corporate side. So Justin, how do you take information like this and have a meaningful conversation with the people that quite frankly write the checks at the end of the day?
You take this article and you print it as big as you can and you make that the wallpaper for the president. Done.
Okay.
Look, well, I think this speaks to understanding needs, right? When we're spending money, when we're trying to decide where the budget's going to go, I know it's challenging, especially at the higher ed level. Budget is a really difficult thing, but you can get locked down on return on investment based on gear and uptime and number of students who are interfacing with it and your remote student head count. You can get all those metrics, but if you still didn't, as the university, if you didn't meet the needs of your faculty and students, you didn't meet the needs, and there's nothing else to say. Back when I was in the boardroom example, before technology got a little bit better, in a role I had, we used to kind of say, like, the integrator can put all this money, time, and integration into a conferencing system, but when it doesn't work, and Dave from accounting FaceTimes instead of using the conference system, one, that might not show up as a bug or as a ticket, and you don't even know what's happening, but he's walking out of there and he's going to go right to somebody's office and say, that system's stupid. So it really, I'm going to beat the drum of needs. You have to understand them, and understanding and meeting them is much more profitable than we're led to think. I have kids in college, and this report talks about students who look for hybrid classes. Neither of my kids looked for hybrid classes. That wasn't a part of their decision. But my oldest has had several hybrid classes because that's how they were offered. And if the technology wasn't working, that still hits those students too. And we know that getting the bodies in the classrooms is where a lot of the revenue comes from. So hybrid or not, the technology has to show up.
Let me just say, if your name is Dave and you work in accounting and you're FaceTiming somebody and talking about financials, you should be fired, because that is an unsecured line talking about company finances. But that's beside the point. Ross, same similar here, but when you help integrators and you're talking to folks, because an LED wall, is not inexpensive, right? It is not like going to a box store and picking up a TV. How do you have those conversations about, Justin mentioned it, about the ROI of a system that is an investment?
That conversation is certainly getting easier in higher education. You mentioned the cost. LED costs are starting to come down. A 100-inch LED screen in a boardroom or a classroom or a training room is starting to become more in line with a high-end projector, $12,000, $13,000 for a sort of standard product. That comes with good and bad bits, which is that as the product comes down, the use cases tend to get more complicated. We're starting to see immersive environments with LED and, particularly XR and virtual reality in higher education and in corporate. We're starting to see LED being used not just for digital signage, but for immersion. We're living in an attention society. The younger generation, everything that they do is screen-based. And so you're starting to see much more creative use cases for LED, which makes things more tricky from a maintenance and service perspective. I don't know whether it's the same in America. It's probably a good opportunity for you to learn, but in the UK and Europe, if your lecture theatre projector's not working, the university's fined. Particularly with international students, these are businesses, they're making large sums of money, and you've got international students paying private fees to be educated. If they can't provide the hardware to do that, then they can face a fine. So we tend to find a lot of the universities now have internal integration teams, and I have to admit, some of them are the most talented that I've worked with. They on a deep level understand how each of their classrooms work, generally because they have either designed them in-house or they've worked with the integrator as to how we expect it to work when the user comes in, etc. But as I said before, when you've got 100 different brands perhaps in the rack, and the lecturer's meant to walk in and press a button and start presenting, if that moment fails, there's a chance you're going to lose the captive audience for the entirety of that class. I think I would say that some university campuses in the UK in America that I've spoken to are leading the way when it comes to having their own teams on the ground dealing with these situations. And some of the corporate clients I work with could probably learn from them, actually.
To answer your question, I'm not aware of a state or local ordinance that says that if your system does not work, that you can get a fine from a student. I know that there's not one at the federal level, but they start there.
I think if there was one, there'd be a collapse of
Oh my gosh,
the American
you're right.
higher ed system.
Every single one. I mean, the only one, I won't pick on him this week. So I was going to pick on Joe A and UCLA, but I won't do that this week. Dawn, part of the research says 65% of institutions are choosing to modernize existing rooms rather than replace technology wholesale. You have done this in your previous job. So when you're looking at, okay, we only have X amount, how do you triage a building-wide, a campus-wide AV problem with a limited budget, and how do you decide this room gets a Band-Aid and this room gets completely overhauled?
I mean, unfortunately, at the end of the day, it all comes down to money and who's got the juice. And if you're talking about 3 rooms that some engineers use versus the room that the president of the company uses every time he or she is in town, guess which one's going to get that budget money, even if it's been more recently done? It's one of those things that money talks, power talks, those folks are going to get it. And companies, and I'm sure universities, they love to Band-Aid things. And they Band-Aid things until they completely don't work, like at all. Coming across in 2026, RGB HV systems and VGA systems that haven't been touched since they were installed, and nobody's used them in forever, but suddenly there's people there that need to use these rooms and there's no technology. So, well, yeah, that's important. You need to put some tech in there. But guess what? You may or may not get the budget for that site or that building or that program or that whatever to do it. So it's a constant balancing act. It's a constant challenge. It's one of those things like when your boss puts 12 things on your desk and says they're all top priority. It's like, well, that's not triage. You need to tell me which is really top priority. Same with the rooms. You got to kind of play that game of these rooms desperately need to be replaced. Now, will I be able to do that, or will somebody else come in with a bigger pocket or a bigger perceived or actual importance and cry their way to the front of the line? And it happens. It's unfortunate, but it's a constant challenge, and it's not something any of us can easily solve from a university perspective, from a corporate perspective at all. And frankly, if you think Dave from accounting, Tim, is the only one that needs to be fired for using their FaceTime, I could tell you horror stories that would curl your hair.
I don't want to know horror stories because I know where you used to work, and that, yeah.
I don't want to know the horror stories either, but guess what?
They're out there.
Here we are.
It's definitely a challenge. And it's not just students in university. And I agree with, was it Ross or Justin? One of them said, we need to get this, or even Tim, get this study repeated on the corporate level. It's not just going to the president of the college and saying, hey, your students are going to leave or your professors are going to leave. In corporations, you've got vice presidents, you've got customers, you've got the president of the company, him or herself, that doesn't actually have the final say on the budget. They're in charge of the entire enterprise. But when it comes to budget, we're talking locations, we're talking buildings, we're talking teams that are given money that they have to distribute as needed. And then when your president or your customer or your whoever says, I'm not coming back here, your technology sucks, then suddenly it's a problem. So, from a corporate side, you can have just as many problems with the actual bottom line leaving as you would with students leaving. And we're right, Ross, if America had a fee system, if you had a fine system, if you had problems with your room, the whole modern system would collapse.
I find it interesting that complexity is actually, going back to our first story, complexity is a big part of this. And what Ross was saying, people who have to make these decisions and run these systems and take care of them, they are bombarded by voices, first of all, people, and then they're bombarded by technology. Even one manufacturer might make a presentation that just feels like noise after a certain point and buzzwords, because there is so much to try to absorb, especially when we're talking about managed cloud, multiple campuses, things like that. And, one of the things that manufacturers could really lean into is small bites. What can we do to provide smaller bites that are a more manageable investment that can really illustrate what is available and then make that scalable? But you have to think from the ground up for that path. And that's hard to do as technology is moving quickly, as need and demand is moving quickly.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Dawn Mead, how do people connect with you? And how do they hire you? I did not plan this, but we have two souls who are looking for their new home. Dawn Mead is one of them.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Dawn Mead, Meade, just like the fort or the general. You can find me throughout the socials at AVDawn. You can find me here in the archives and on this current show at AVNation.tv. And just ask Tim if you see him at E4 or any other event that he might be at. Say, hey, where's Dawn? How do I get in touch with her? And he would be delighted, I hope, to pass on my name, and I would be delighted to speak with you.
I would be delighted, absolutely. Mr. Justin O'Connor, you were also looking for your next gig, so how do people connect with you?
I'm also on LinkedIn, very, very findable. I don't think there are a lot of Justin O'Connors, but if you want to go right to the source, I have, email. So if you're watching this and you want to write down an email address, jocaudioPro@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have trouble finding me, Tim can always get a hold of me.
Also accurate, yes. Ross is not looking for a job.
For now.
LED, don't do that to me. How do people connect with you? How do they connect with DigiLED, sir?
Best way to contact me, just drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. DigiLED, we've got a great showroom and training centre in Las Vegas. It's not far from the convention centre. So if you want to swing by and meet a member of the team, just drop me a message and I can set that up for you.
All right, very good. Do not connect with me. If you want to read things that I write that have nothing to do with technology, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. But go by the website, please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others. Mitchell has been awfully busy. We have a number of new specials up. You can go by there and check that out. Dawn mentioned E4. She was very kind. I will, by the time this posts, I will be in the Washington, D.C. area, very close to Dawn. The DMV that I've now learned that term, at the Alamo E4 event in the D.C. area. It actually is in Virginia, doing the keynote for the Alamo E4, talking about the three things that integrators need to pay attention to make sure that they stay in business for the next 12 months. AV network security, rules and regulations, and oh yeah, their finances. So you can check that out. That is not my last trip of the year, not my last trip of the month. Also going to ISC West on the 25th and 26th of March. Chicago is where a Logi Works event on the 8th of April, and then we will round out the first third of the year. I don't know. April 19th through the 22nd, we will be at NAB. You'll find videos and stuff like that at the website. So go by the website, avnation.tv. It's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.